I don't see it as a dramatic move because NATO and Russia have not really been talking to each other now since that Russian annexation of Crimea back in 2014 that you referred to. The NATO Russia Council, which is the body that NATO and Russia set up in 2002 to have regular exchanges, has not met since 2019. And frankly, after NATO announced last week that it was expelling eight Russian diplomats from the mission, I expected that sooner or later Sergei Lavrov would retaliate. But the important thing is that the dialogue does go on because the NATO Secretary General does meet occasionally with Sergei Lavrov, recently in New York, and the NATO senior military commanders meet with the Russian commanders from time to time as well. So this is not the end of the diplomatic or military relationship as such.
But what would you say, though, about the bigger picture here? I mean, we're already looking at historically low relations, deep frozen relations between Russia and the West. What does this do to those kind of relations?
Well, clearly, after Russia committed the outrage of annexing Crimea illegally back in 2014, NATO couldn't simply conduct business as usual and pretend that nothing had happened. So in 2014, although the NATO Russia Council was left in existence, all of the practical work that was under that, such as conversations on exercises, on nuclear weapons, on terrorism, was frozen. And as Russia was not meeting NATO's condition to go back to a dialogue, which was, of course, evacuating Crimea, it was not really to be anticipated that the two sides would meet again. But the clear thing is that there does have to be a dialogue between the two sides, obviously, particularly on things like dangerous military activities, the harassment of ships, of aircraft in the Black Sea and the Baltic. You've seen all of that. But NATO is simply going to have to find now other channels for conducting that dialogue. For instance, via the US meeting with Russia, or through other allies in their contacts with Russia.
Do you see any prospect of that actually happening, that dialogue being resumed?
Well, yes, the dialogue carries on. The first thing is that NATO and Russia have not cancelled the political agreements that bind them together. For example, the NATO Russia Founding Act back in 1997. So they haven't sort of torn up the treaties, if you like, and you can close down the mission, but you can reopen that mission in the time that it would take Moscow to fly some of its diplomats back to Brussels, only a couple of hours. And today, Foreign Minister Lavrov was very careful to say that he was only suspending the activities of the Russian mission to NATO, again implying that Russia doesn't want to sort of rub out everything. It knows that sooner or later it's going to have to resume a dialogue with NATO, and simply by suspending the office, it would be able to resume it rather quickly. There have been two occasions in the past where NATO and Russia have stopped talking to each other, over Kosovo in '99 and over Georgia in 2008. But those negotiations, those talks did start after a period of time, after a calling off period. And Russia has done everything to make sure that it can resume that dialogue quickly when the circumstances are right, as can NATO.